Hey, how's it going? My name's Kevin and I'm with Let Me Tech You, and this is my blog. And today I'm going to be talking about how you can build a home lab using AWS. Now, you may be wondering, why would you want to do this? But people build home labs all the time, and gone are the days where you need to buy expensive gear and house like a bunch of servers in your house, things like that. But I mean, those days are still here, not necessarily saying they're gone, but essentially you can reduce your cost and still learn all the things you need to learn in IT. So, this video isn't for anyone who's just is in IT. It could be for anyone who is specifically looking to get in IT or learn cloud or different types of other technologies that they couldn't necessarily do before because they didn't have the equipment in their house. So what I'm going to do today is basically just kind of walk you through how to build a home lab using some various techniques in AWS. Now, this is my blog here, and basically what I kind of do is just go through the whole life cycle of creating an account, setting up your your username information, basically setting up a decent network to be able to utilize some of the different services within AWS. Now, this isn't meant to be like any best practice, guide or anything like that, but it's just a great way to kind of get your hands wet on some of the things that's going on out there in the world. Now, utilizing AWS, you could be using Azure or anything like that, but just to kind of give you some insights, AWS actually has certifications as well. So like if we go and look, at some different certifications, one of the ones that a lot of people kind of go for first is like the practitioner one. So their Practitioner Exam. So basically, you can essentially sign up for an account with Amazon and sit to take this exam. And this exam is only $100. Now, you may be wondering why would I want to take that exam, this and that. And a lot of the reasons is it's very, how can I say, it kind of puts you out there with jobs. It's not necessarily saying that you have all the required knowledge to, run a cloud network, but when you're applying, these type of things kind of, put you out there in the front. So, cloud engineering jobs are, exploding. A lot of people working from home. There's a lot of people who might have been in IT for, 3, 4, 5 years looking for their next way to kind of, come up. So, with that, there, some of these salaries and things like that are, great ways of getting people out there, making more money. And, just cloud is, the future of what a lot of companies are going to. So with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and kind of get us started off here. So essentially, first step in here is, essentially you need an account. So if you don't have an account, you're going to want to go to Amazon.com, or actually aws.amazon.com. And you're going to want to go into where it says sign in to, well, I'm probably already signed in from earlier, but I'll sign out. Now, what we have is if you hit sign into console, if you don't already have an account, you'll need to, set an account. So you'll just sign in using, no, that's not what we want. There we go. So create a new AWS account. So I already have one of these, but basically you just need an email and then just give your account a name, and then you're going to have to verify that email. But since I already have my account set up, I'm going to go ahead and sign in. And while I put my information in, let me hide this real quick. Put my email. Actually, so I'm using an account ID. So essentially it's an account alias, which let me go to it here. 1 second. And then also with my account, I'm also using multi-factor authentication. So with that, I'll bring that up here in a sec. So what that does is it essentially uses like a token on my phone to authenticate that not only that do I know my password, but I need to have something to essentially say I am who I am. So let me grab my phone here. So some people use different types of authentication. So you got the Google Authenticator, Authy, Twilio, stuff like that. So put this code in. And actually, I should probably hide that as well. So let me throw my code in there. Okay, so I'm signed in. And now when you come in, you're going to come into your AWS account. And essentially, there's a lot of things you might see in here, but AWS actually makes it very easy to kind of get off the ground running with anything that you want to do. So they already essentially create you your own virtual private network. And you'll see that in here where it says VPC. This is the default. Now, most people, what you'll want to do is, which we'll do in this video, is create your own. Now, this one, as you'll see, there's multiple regions, and these regions are basically parts of the world that houses Amazon's data centers. And within those regions, there's multiple availability zones for redundancy purposes, things like natural disasters and stuff like that. So you kind of want to pick a region that's closer to you. Pricing does change, but for the stuff that we're going to do, Amazon has a free tier available that essentially makes it very cheap, a couple bucks a month to run like servers and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and, stick with the Ohio region there. Now, going back to our blog here, you're basically going to create your account. And then once you get your account created, like I was saying, you want to make sure you turn on AWS multi-factor authentication. And the reason being is I'm already set up on this, but you want to do that because if your account password or something gets stolen, they can't just get into your account with that. They're going to need to have that authentication token and things like that. So it's just an extra method of security. You've probably seen that on a lot of different apps that you use nowadays. And after that, that's actually going to be in the IAM section. And when you want to look up some of this stuff, you can actually type, those things up there and then pin it there up at the top. So that actually, once that loads, okay, so this is where all your identity and access management occurs. Once you go in here, you really don't have to do too much unless you're adding like roles and things like that, but you'll probably get more into that down the line once you start getting into different types of services. So I'm going to go back into VPC. And what we're going to do is we're going to keep this simple. Now, in the blog, it actually does walk you through essentially creating your subnets and things like that. And what that's going to do is basically segment your network out to have like a public and a private subnet. Now, we can go a single public subnet, which we'll do, but in a production network, you'll probably want it to have a private subnet for like your stuff that you don't want directly connected to the internet, and then a public subnet that's going to have your NAT gateway, things like that. It could be web servers, all sorts of things out there, and then those would essentially route all your public or private traffic to the internet. But we won't get too much into that. So what we're going to essentially do is we're going to create a single public subnet, VPC. And they actually make it really simple. If you go up to here, now in a traditional network, you'll probably automate a lot of this. I'll actually show you at the end why it's better to automate using like infrastructure as code, like Terraform, which I'll do another video on that, but it just makes it easier for like cleanup. So like say every day you want to just spin up your network, you can essentially spin it up within seconds. And then when you're done for the day, you could just destroy it. You don't have to remember what you did or what resources you might have left out there. And then you get like some big bill at the end of the month. So I'm going to go ahead and hit create VPC. And there's an option. Now this is like their newer format. If you follow the blog, it might look a little different, but it's still essentially the same. I'm just going to go ahead and do VPC and more. And I'm going to just call this Homelab. And that's going to go, basically this is for like tag auto generation. So tagging is very important in AWS. Essentially what it does is it kind of helps you categorize your resources so that you can maybe understand what this is, what this particular resource is for, billing purposes, things like that, automation, understanding like if you're dealing with an EC2 instance versus like a database, stuff like that. Now your CIDR block, this is for your network. So your VPC is essentially assigned a CIDR block. And as you can see within this VPC, we can essentially have up to 65,536 IP addresses. Now we won't do any IPv6 type stuff. We won't do a dedicated tenancy. Now availability zones, this is where this comes in. So availability zones, essentially, it provides high availability. Now for a Homelab, for what we're doing, you don't really need it. Essentially what it does is it may create multiple subnets in multiple VPCs or multiple availability zones. So like say if you have resources that sit in one region, that region goes down, you can still essentially get to your resources from the other availability zone. We won't do that. We'll do one. Now, number of public subnets, it's going to be either 0 or 1. But what we're going to do is we're going to do no private subnets. What we're essentially going to have is servers that essentially just sit in that network and they can get right out to the internet, whether it be with a elastic IP address, which is essentially its own dedicated IP, or if you're using like, Linux or Bastion host or something, and it just needs to get out to the internet to get updates and stuff like that. Those are the type of things that, we'll be able to just directly connect to. And no NAT gateway. NAT gateway, if you try to, it'll, you essentially, you need a public subnet, but we won't need it because we're just going to go right out, to the internet. With our host, with its own elastic IP address, because we're essentially just going to remote in using that IP address, and then it's going to be able to get out using that its own static IP. If we wanted had multiple hosts and things like that we need to get out, we would essentially throw that NAT gateway on there. And then VPC endpoints. This is just a way for you to be able to securely connect to the AWS network without having to use, the NAT gateway. It's basically using endpoints that are provisioned in AWS to connect directly to their essentially public/private network. Now we're going to hit create. So as you can see, this is the preview. It's going to create a VPC called Homelab. It's going to create a subnet. It's going to create a route table. And then the route table, it's going to, talk directly to the internet gateway. And as you can see, all of this gets created. Now, as you become used to using AWS, you probably want to go through and actually create all of this manually. And what that does is it kind of gets in your head how these things all are interconnected. When you're first getting started, it might be easier to understand, like, let it automate itself. And then you can come here and hit view VPC. And it's essentially now you got your default one that's up here, but then you got your Homelab VPC. And you can see how the naming helps because, if you don't put a name on it, you have to kind of figure out, like, what's this one belong to. Now, this VPC then has its subnets. And you can see it has this Homelab subnet public 1 and US East 1A availability zone. It's using a CIDR of 10.0.0.0/20. So essentially, you get up to 4,091 IP addresses. You could have skinnied that down if you wanted to, but I mean, for a Homelab network, we're not going to really worry about that too much. And then here you got your route tables. Now, the route table is essentially how your traffic is routed throughout your network. So for this one, it's going to be real simple. Anything 10.0, which is essentially anything that's on the 10.0.0.0 up to 10.0.255.255 network, is going to stay local to the network. It's not going to go anywhere. Anything outside of that, it's essentially going to go to the internet gateway. So if you see here, there was an internet gateway that was created. And this internet gateway is essentially what's attached out to get you out to the internet. Now, the great thing about these are it's an AWS managed service. So it's already highly available. You don't have to do any type of routing. You don't have to understand. They're doing all that on the back end. So that's like another great thing about using like services like AWS and the cloud, because it reduces the cost and the need for you to understand all the extras in terms of, routing redundancy, different types of routing protocols and stuff like that. Now you can get deep into some of that stuff when you start getting into like, the transit gateways and, VPNs and stuff like that. You might start doing, stuff way beyond this, the scope of this video, but you still kind of have to do some things once your network starts getting pretty complex. So now that we have all this set up, we don't have to really do anything else in here. Everything else is pretty much set. So based off of this, video here, if you can see kind of this diagram, we have our VPC here, we have a public subnet, and now we have a connection out to the internet. Now you can kind of think of this as like your home network. So your home is kind of like your VPC. Then you have your provider, who is either Spectrum or AT&T, and you have just a router that takes you out to the internet. And this is essentially that, but in the cloud. So you don't have to worry about having some box sitting in your house and pay for routers and switches and keep it off of your separate network. And basically, now that that's all set up, we're going to go into actually building a server. So now one of the biggest reasonings for wanting to build a home network is to learn things. So what we're going to do is switch over to our EC2 tab here. And this is our essentially what they call Elastic Compute Cloud. This is has things like, so you see how it switches over to Northern Virginia. AWS houses like a lot of their infrastructure in Northern Virginia. Actually, let me make sure my VPC wasn't created in that region. I may have and not paid attention. So, well, actually, yeah, because we're on Northern Virginia. So, yeah, we're not going to worry about that. So, actually, if I go to my subnets and look here, yeah, so US East 1, US East 1, that's fine. So, I would rather have picked Ohio. It probably just switched. Sometimes it switches depending on the service that you're using. So, costs are just different sometimes, but not very much. So, we'll go back to EC2 here. And we'll go to instances. And instances is where all of your servers will sit. So we're going to go ahead and launch one. And they give you like messages like this. I'm just going to remain in the old experience for now. The newer experience, actually, I guess I could go into the new one. Basically, from my lab, it's probably using the older experience. Actually, let me see. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, it is. So I'll keep it on this. The newer one, actually, I'll open it up in maybe a new tab. Probably won't let me. Yeah, so it won't let you. Basically, they have it formatted a different way. it's more like a top-down approach to how you build your instance and configure everything. They kind of make it a little more simplified. They automate some of the stuff, but we'll keep it like this for now. So this is their marketplace. You got AMIs. These are ones you would have built. The marketplace is ones for like things like firewalls, providers like OpenVPN, just different types of software solutions, and they incur their own separate cost outside of AWS as well. So depending on licensing and stuff like that. So if you go on a quick start, you can you essentially type in we're just going to do like a Windows server, and you see these free tier eligible. Free tier eligible means you get AWS has a tier of services that they provide that essentially gives you like so many hours a month, like say 720 hours of free compute a month, but the instance is only like say like 1 gig of RAM or 2 gigs of RAM or whatever, and then like 20 gigs of like hard drive space, stuff like that, just enough to give you some free wiggle room to kind of test things out and go from there. So I'm going to go ahead and select this one. There's really no difference between this one, but just that this one says base with containers. So I'm going to select this. And the great thing about this is you don't need licensing. Now you can bring your own licensing. There's probably a whole new segment separate that I haven't really dealt with for that, but the licensing you don't have to worry about. So like now, back in the old days, if you had your own home server at home, if you wanted Windows Server 2012 or the newest 16 or something, you're probably either getting it illegally or, trying to figure out how to, get yours up to date to the newest one. And now you don't have to worry about that. So as you can see here, we get 1 VPC, 1 CPU, 1 gig of memory. So it's not going to let you do a lot, but you can get into some of these other ones, and the cost on these isn't a lot. I'll open up one of these pages real quick just to kind of show you. So if you look at like a T2, so for a T2 medium, 2 gigs, let's see if there's a calculator on here. They usually give you like a set amount or how much it'll cost like per hour. They may not have it on here. Pricing here at the top. So on demand, see on demand pricing. And looks like, so it kind of depends. Like it's really small. Like let's say, I don't know, 5 cents an hour. That might actually be a lot, but let's see. So let's say for a whole month times 0.05, it could run you $36 to run a server continuously. And that's if you're running it continuously. If you have it turned off, you don't get charged for that. Unless you got like things like an elastic IP address, which I believe if it's just not attached, you won't get charged. But if it's attached to something, you won't. So let's just go back and let's select that. We're going to hit next. We're going to make sure that we select our Homelab VPC. It's in this subnet. We're going to have it actually auto assign a public IP. And the reason being is this is how we're going to connect to it from our home network. Host name type, we're going to probably just keep all of this the same. We don't need that. Not directory joined. All this is just going to stay, no changes there. So, and then storage. The storage, you get 30 gigs free. There's some different volume types, but you don't have to change any of that. I'm going to go ahead and add our tags. I would say add a tag. We're just going to call this name for the key, and then the value is going to be Homelab Windows Server. Oop. My light there fell off. Help me out there. Some technical difficulties. There we go. All right. How are we looking there? Okay. So, all right, basically, so now we got that set up. Basically going to go ahead and go into our security groups. Now the security groups are what essentially allows you to access these over the internet. So you can either do 0.0.0.0/0, or if you want to really secure it, I'm not going to show my home address, but you can actually go to Google and type in what is my IP, hit enter, it'll show your IP address, slap it in there, and then just throw like a /32 on the end of it. And then you could throw a description saying, Kevin's home IP address. And then this is saying basically that the security group name, we can call it Homelab Security Group. And then description, allow access to Windows Server on port 3389. Now, if you haven't, so yeah, that's it. So you can add additional rules, but this is a Windows Server, so they already kind of give you the ports that you need to gain access to it. If it was like a Linux, you would need like SSH or FTP or whatever you're trying to use it for. We're going to review it. All this is good, and then we're going to launch. Now, this you need to, before you don't hit cancel or anything, we want to create a new key pair. And basically, we need to call this, let's just call it a Homelab. I'm going to download that key pair, and it's going to create it in a PIM format. And we're going to hit launch instance. Now that instance is getting created. If we go back to EC2 here, you're going to see that it's going to be coming up. It's not running, so you see it says pending. While that's pending, what we want to do is when you download this PIM file, in the new format, when you do a launch instance, if you do this opt-in new experience, they do it completely different now. When you do a key, it actually gives you the PuTTY format, which is actually nice that they do it now, but because now you have to actually use, I think it's PuTTY Gen, yes. So you have to use this tool. You can PuTTY key generator. Essentially, what you do is you have to load your private key and download. Just go hit all files. Homelab. And what you want to do is save your private key. You don't need a passphrase on it. And it's going to call this Homelab. And that's it. So exit out of there. And there's a tool called PA Agent, whatever they call it. You essentially need to add that key in there. So you'll hit View Keys. Oh no, what am I doing? Yeah, skip all that. That's if you're going to be SSHing into the. If this was Linux, you want to do it that way. So I just kind of drew a blank there. So basically what you'll do is you'll go back into EC2. Let's go to our instance. Okay, it's now running. And we'll hit connect. What this will do is, and I really don't care about having to share this, but you're going to download this remote desktop file, and we should essentially be able to get to it. Now you see now you need a password. So the way to get that password is hit get password here. So you gotta wait. Okay. So let's just give that a second here. So while that's waiting, actually, just want to kind of go through some of the other stuff here on the left. So as you're getting used to using AWS, you'll want to come in and essentially just go over some of this stuff on the left, like your instance type. Maybe you take your instance and figure out how to upgrade that instance. Like, kind of give yourself some tasks to take your skills to the next level. Like, think of ways of like how would a production network, set up a web server for access for like a specific website. Like if you're hosting your own blog, just reads through some of their documentation. A lot of the services that Amazon uses, you may not essentially use. Like they have tons of services, like for various different things, analytics, application. It depends on like where you're trying to see yourself go. Like if you're more in the development realm, you might deal with like databases or developer tools, Kubernetes, Docker, containers, things like that. That's where maybe you'll spend most of your time. If you're in the networking realm, like maybe you'll be doing like DNS, Route 53, CDN type stuff, load balancers. Like you'll probably spend most of your time in EC2, VPCs, learning like different things like VPC peering, transit gateway, CloudFront, identity and access management, storage. S3 is a big one. So S3 is probably used by many companies in the world. So essentially, like this is a way to kind of get your hands dirty and get some of these technologies stacks under your umbrella. So that way, when you do kind of talk to these, whether it be employers, you can kind of talk some sense into like how some of these things can work and improve some of the solutions that they're using. So I'm going to go ahead and check this out again. Let's just see, what it's doing here. I want to try to connect to this just to show you how this works. The reason they probably have it wait for so while because it's probably still coming up. Okay, there we go. So go to downloads, Homelab, and then decrypt password. Take that password. I'm going to delete this stuff anyway, so it doesn't matter if you see it. Take that password, stick that in there, and there you go. Well, actually, I don't even know if you guys can see this, so let me switch screens here. Display capture. Okay, there we go. So you see it loading up here. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a little bit because remember, we are on the free tier, so you're not going to get a lot of resources out of this thing. It's going to move slow, but you kind of get the idea now. Like you got essentially an entire server here at your fingertips. You don't have to worry about paying for any of this stuff, sitting at your house, eating up your, I have a Dell server in my house, probably chewing up my electric bill, but those things, it's just not really needed anymore. I mean, the days of having to worry about failed disk and redundancy are kind of slowing down. I wouldn't say that there really isn't use case for them because sometimes it could be cheaper because in some senses, depending on what you're doing, the cloud can be expensive, but you also got to have the manpower on premise to manage and host a lot of different applications. And if you can't do it, best way is the cloud. You got Azure, you got Google Cloud. I think there's some other providers out there like Oracle, things like that. So it just all depends. But as you can see, you can come in, you can, maybe create some, do some things like Active Directory, SQL servers, install your own open source software. Maybe you want to test an open source package that you don't want to do on your own computer. This is a way to do it here because once it's done, you can just delete it. You delete this entire server and then it won't matter. So I'm going to go ahead and log off of this. Actually, just close it. And let's switch back screens here. So now that we got that set up, that's essentially it. That IP address, you can essentially save this file. But what's going on is it's taking this public IP, and you can essentially use that to access your instance using remote desktop. Now, the reason I was talking about earlier, what we're going to do now that we're coming to the end of this video is we're going to have to get rid of everything. And the problem with that is now you have to understand what you're getting rid of. To maybe you want to minimize your costs. Like let's say you don't want to delete everything. You can actually just come in here, hit actions or instance state, and then stop. And this will actually stop it, and that'll reduce costs. So now you don't have an instance that's just constantly running. You can bring it up whenever you come in for the day or wake up or you're studying. Or if you are done with it, you can actually do a terminate. There's ways of changing. There's other ways you can change, like the instance type, but I believe that has to be shut down. So change instance type isn't allowed. Now that it's stopped, I can essentially come in here and change it to something else if I wanted to. Say that's just too slow. We've been using it. We need something bigger. But you know what? We're done for the day, so I'm actually going to terminate this. So now that that's shutting down, well, it's already shut down. It's going to delete that. Well, it's also going to delete the storage. But let's say we want to try to delete this entire VPC. We just want to get rid of everything. The subnets, the routing tables, the internet gateway. It's a small network, so, it's not too much to remember, but it's not going to let you just delete this because there's dependencies. Well, actually, this time it does. Well, so what happens sometimes is you will have, let's say you have a NAT gateway, and that's attached to like an elastic IP address. Well, it won't just let you delete it because you need to get rid of those resources. Now, it's probably because we don't have many resources that are dependent. That the EC2 instance is actually deleted, so it didn't detect that. So if we hit delete here, this should get rid of everything. Yeah, it looks like it is. And that's it. Everything's gone. Shouldn't get billed for anything. If you did, it's probably a couple cents. I don't even think Amazon will even hit your card unless it's like a certain amount. They probably lose more money than they would trying to charge you 25 cents or something at the end of the month. So, this is just a great way to kind of get yourself, acclimated with building a network in AWS. Like I said, come in, continue to try new things. I hope this, video was helpful. Along with our blog article, you might be able to run through it a little faster. The video was just kind of there to kind of guide you through some of the different newer screens that might be different from what you see in here. I'll try to get this updated as well. If you have any questions, drop a comment in the video. This will be posted on YouTube, and I'll also update the blog article to have this video. Again, thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next time on our next video. We'll probably go over, how to automate this without having to do it step by step.